Hello, this is Cho of the Shiny Colors Discord. Welcome to another episode of the Shiny Review. Today we have 3 returning cards to talk about. A limited produce SSR for Tenka, a limited support SSR for Meguru, and for one reason or another, since this is where actually she debuted, we have the produce SR for Fuyuko, who is permanent. Keep in mind that Tenka and Meguru may not return, but if reruns continue as they are, we may see them return again in the future. Keep in mind that we won't be making a new review for Amana 3, as that is a banner that we talked about way back in 2019. So feel free to check out the video linked above. First off, we have Tenka. Taking us back to late April or early May, since she debuted I think on the 30th of April in 2019, so more or less a May card. Tenka 2 returns as a key piece for finishing Dance Alstroemeria for new and old producers alike. In her initial release, Tenka was praised for being one of the very few AoE units, and the only produced card for Dance that could do it. Tenka also proved herself to be a real menace to revenge teams thanks to her appeal applying immediate healing to both herself and to rivals. Tenka 2's biggest downfall is the fact that her passives are really not all that powerful nowadays. She's heavily carried by her AoE appeals at max health, and really needs support to keep up in the damage department compared to many of the strongest teams that float in higher grades. That being said, Tenka 2 is a perfect fit alongside Amana 3 and Chiyuki 6 if you happen to pull for either of those banners. If you have Chiyuki, Tenka is a surefire win of a card. I moderately to highly recommend pulling for Tenka. Her roles are Attack All, Healer, and she scales on Stamina. Tenka's initial skill is a Dance 0.4 to 2.0 appeal that attacks all judges and scales based on how high your mental is, and also applies a mental 10% heal to all units, so again that means not just yourself but also all of your rivals. This links into a Dance 0.3 to 1.5 appeal that scales based on how high your mental is. At max, Tenka unlocks a Dance 0.7 to 3.5 appeal that attacks all judges, scales based on how high your mental is, and applies the same mental 10% heal to you and all rivals. This links into a Dance 0.4 to 2.0 appeal that scales based on how high your mental is. Tenka's 1-star passive is a Dance 21% up and mental 3% heal that requires your mental to be 80% or higher. This has a 20% chance to activate 2 times per fest run. Her 2-star passive is a Dance 60% up and a mental 5% heal that again requires your mental to be 80% or higher, and shares the same 20% activation chance twice across a run. Her 3-star uncap is a Dance plus 200, and her memory appeal once maxed out is a Dance 0.6 to 3.0 appeal that scales based on how high your mental is, and links into a mental 5% regen for 4 turns. Remember that mental regen applies the healing immediately once the turn starts, which is after you've selected your appeals, not while you're selecting your appeals. So it may feel a little slow, but the heal will be nice. For the support recommendations, Dance Alstroemeria's current issue is a lack of meaningful dance supports, so we have to opt for other teams as an engine of sorts. Hokura have access to a bevy of buffs and powerful dance supports, which paired with 1 or 2 Dance Amana work pretty well. And yes, that does seem pretty familiar. Just like with Chiyuki 6, filling out the rest of your support options with beefier dance cards works out fairly well. Sakuya is a newer option that has passives that mostly fit Alstroemeria at the cost of having lower activation chances. For the team recommendation, nothing has changed really with the overall description of this team from the Chiyuki 6 review, so I have nothing really to add that I haven't said already. Tenka is better suited as a damage dealer than a center if you have Chiyuki, but if you don't have her, then Tenka 2 or Amana 3 are great as a center as a backup plan. The alternative cards you can choose for the team include Illuminate focused builds for multi-stat buffing as well as mono for additional AoE. If you want a more aggressive playstyle, then Kaho 4 Choco 3 for dance is great, and if you want more active buffing with an additional nuke on hand, Fuyuko and Asahi are a great choice for Stray Light. Overall, Tenka as a center earns anywhere from a B to a B+. There was a point where Tenka's memory appeal was pretty good, but the follow-up regen is nowhere near as valuable or necessary as it once was, and you could probably argue it wasn't all that valuable to begin with. It has decent upfront damage, which makes it useful for lower grade fest levels. Just mind your health before you use it. You want to be as healthy as possible to maximize out on that damage. As a unit, she earns a B- to an A. Kinda like a handful of other AoE units, she earns an A mostly off of that merit alone. Tenka's passives nowadays are pretty bad, with her gold passive being the only real redeemer, which is still not necessarily amazing. The fact that she pairs up insanely well with Amana 3 and Chiyuki 6 helps keep her relevant. If you can't run her alongside Alstroemeria, perhaps maybe you use her as a splashable character in another unit, she's going to feel a lot clunkier, which earns her that B. The AoE, again, is her saving grace in this situation. But overall, she's still a fine card. Next we have Meguru. Flower Meguru, as she's better known as, is arguably one of the best support cards to pull for in terms of general comfort. She comes with, for the time being, an exclusive mastery in Audition Mastery Mental, leading to wing runs being much less stressful. Remember that after an audition, you earn Vocal Dance and Visual normally. You can't earn Mental after an audition, but Meguru allows you to have that as an option, which is incredibly useful. And she has access to this at 0 stars, which is another huge boon for this card. She does have double unit mastery for vocal and visual, as well as talk show room stamina, which is the icing on top. Her support skills are Idol's Bond, Promise Recovery, and Rest Boost, and she has 4 unique support skills. The first being Unit Mastery Vocal and Unit Mastery Visual, which both reach +8 at level 70. Next, she has Audition Mastery Mental, reaching +6 at level 50. Lastly, she has Talk Mastery Stamina, reaching +5 at level 75. Her TFD idea is Appeal, her Insight token for Grad is Dance, and her proficiency and landing point is Unity. Meguru's 1-star passive is a Vocal Visual 30% up that requires the turn count to be 6 or earlier. This has a 10% chance to activate 3 times. Her 2-star passive is a Vocal Visual 50% up that requires the turn count to be 3 or later. This also has a 10% chance to activate 3 times. Her 3-star Uncap is a Vocal Visual +70, and her 4-star Appeal is a Vocal Visual 2.0 that applies a Vocal Visual 20% buff for 3 turns. Her event Uncap is a Vocal Visual +25. Meguru earns an A to an S+. Now, let's be real. Meguru is not quite the powerhouse she once was in terms of passives. The double unit mastery and stamina in the talk show helps keep her from falling into a B-tier support range, but by all means is Meguru not a bad choice to pull for. If you've ever wanted to make wing audition runs or training events as comfy as possible, Meguru can do this for you at 0 stars, which is huge in value. I absolutely recommend pulling at least 1 copy of this Meguru, especially if you're one that does not necessarily care about Fess, but really cares about True Ending, because this card will make True Ending feel so much nicer, believe you me. Lastly, we have Fuyuko, our permanent banner among a group of limited cards. Well, she's featured on the banner, so I guess we might as well talk about her. Fuyuko's first PSR was also our first real look at Stray Light's design philosophy, before the phase of introducing units through a P-SSR. Yes, Fuyuko here was actually the first Stray Light card outside of the rares to be added to the game. Here we got to see how active buff scaling would begin, and even started having to differentiate between active buffs and passive buffs, for the sake of making Fuyuko's style of appeal easier to understand in general. If you consider Fuyuko's damage at absolute maximum, she's among some of the harder hitting PSRs in the game. The problem is that she herself is terrible at setting this up, and Stray Light had no real way of actually figuring this playstyle out until they had gotten all their first PSSRs. Nowadays, the SR Stray Light set is okay at best, and feel less clunky thanks to other Stray Light SSRs picking up the slack heavily. I wouldn't recommend running all 3 of the SRs together, however. I put her on the low end of recommendation. She is a permanent card, and there's a very good chance that if you're watching this, you probably already have a copy of this Fuyuko. Her roles are attacker, buffer, as well as buff removal. Fuyuko's initial skill is a Dance 1.0 to 5.0 appeal that removes all active dance buffs in order to reach its highest damage. This means you need a total of 4 separate active dance buffs in order to reach 5.0. This also applies a Vocal Visual 5% buff for 5 turns, and links into a Vocal Visual 10% up for 7 turns. At max, she unlocks a Visual 1.2 to 6.0 appeal that removes all active visual buffs, and applies a Vocal Dance 10% buff for 5 turns, and links into a Vocal Dance 10% up for 7 turns. Fuyuko's 1-star passive is a Vocal 15% up that requires your mental to be 75% or higher. This has a 40% chance to activate once. Her 2-star passive is a Visual 30% up that requires the turn count to be 3 or earlier. This also has a 40% chance to activate once. Her 3-star Uncap is a Visual +100, and her Memory Appeal once maxed out is a Visual 1.5 that links into a Vocal Dance Visual 10% buff for 10 turns. For the support recommendations, Much like what we talked about with Mei 4, dance and visual are Fuyuko's main goals, so prioritize whichever stats make the most sense for your team. Since we can't run Fuyuko supports, consider Dance Mei or Hot Pot Mamimi versus Wanderlust if you want some visual options. The alternatives continue our mix of dance and visual, ideally aiming to keep buffs high and damage higher. Again, Asahi continues to be a great choice in the dance route, while Amana and Mamimi together help make visual a lot comfier to build. No team recommendation this time. Honestly, just look at Mei 4's video and swap out the Fuyuko there for this SR, if you really want to run this card. As a center, she earns a D. Please do not, I beg of you. Fuyuko's memory appeal is the cursed attack and buff instead of buff and attack, defeating the whole purpose of what she wants to do as a card. I think almost any Stray Light card is a better center than Fuyuko. Do not do this to yourself, please. As a unit, she gets anywhere from a D to a B+. So here's the thing. Fuyuko by herself is honestly pretty bad. She can't actually build up enough buffs for herself and her scaling of heals before they wear out, and her passives are practically worthless, especially her event passive. That being said, you can try to make her appeals work now that Stray Light have actual SSRs that can accommodate for this playstyle. I really don't advise it, but you can at least try. And that will do it for the video today. Thank you so much, as always, for watching. Next time we'll talk about whatever banner comes next. Also, the landing point guide is going to take a lot longer. We figured out now that every single song has their own set of missions, which means there is a lot of information we have to parse, as well as figuring out which songs to actually recommend to players, and all this other stuff. So, hopefully I'll be able to get like a very, very quick and simple explanation to the mode, but the guide is going to take a fair bit of time, so please be patient. So, if you liked the video, make sure to like it, and subscribe if you haven't already. I've been Sho, thanks for watching, have a wonderful rest of your day.